Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Andrea Sadie, and I'm a member of the Board of Advisors with the Canadian Women Chamber of Commerce, or KWCC as we call it this board. I will be your MC for today, and you're in for a wonderful treat this morning. I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. The Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce operates on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples in what is colonially known as Toronto, Ontario. A little bit about myself. I am the manager of member services at the Global Risk Institute. GRI is Canada's premier organization for risk management through thought leadership and actionable insights. Bringing together industry, government, and academia, GRI transformed global risk intelligence into practical strategies that strengthen the resilience of Canada's financial sector. I joined CanWCC in 2025 to support an incredible organization dedicated to advancing economic equity and economic equity for women and gender diverse entrepreneurs and self-employed individuals. CanWCC is the first and only chamber of commerce that fills a critical gap in Canada's business ecosystem by championing those who are often excluded from traditional chambers and overlooked in economic policy, providing its members with community, connection, and advocacy to advance gender and economic equity. If you'd like to learn more about the work that CanWCC does, please visit our website at canwcc.ca. Today's high impact panel during Toronto Tech Week exposes the subtle and not so subtle biases women founders face when pitching to investors. The session will spotlight the experiences, data-driven insights, and practical strategies for investors and founders to help women founders get private investments. We move beyond surface level discussions to firstly unpack how bias operates in real investor interactions during and after a pitch, connect lived experiences with research and data that addresses the investment gender gap, share practical tools and strategies for both founders and investors to navigate bias. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I dive into the bios for our wonderful panel today. Firstly, we ask that you keep the noise to a minimum during the presentation to make sure that we are all able to hear. There will be time for a Q&A session at the end. We do ask that you raise your hand when you do have a question, and you'll bring the mic a little closer to you. We would like to thank CanWCC partners for today's event, the Village Hives, for hosting us. Please connect with their team if you're interested in learning more about their co-working space. The Wi-Fi network and passwords listed here. So Eglinton Hive is the network, 120 Eglinton is the password. When you walk out the room here, the women's washrooms are just to your left when facing the elevator, and the men's to your right. And our friends at the welcome desk here have the keys to the washrooms. If you do require the accessible washrooms, Will, who's possibly in the room, if they can raise their hands, has the key. But Will's not here, but we have a key. Yes. Wonderful. And lastly, thank you to the Toronto Tech Week for bringing founders, investors, and builders together across hundreds of community-led events in Toronto, connecting tens of thousands of people around Canadian tech. To begin our introductions, I would like to introduce today's moderator, Nancy Wilson, CEO and founder of the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce. Nancy is a chartered professional accountant with over a decade of accounting and financing experience in the private sector, working with startups, small businesses, and multinational corporations. In 2015, she founded an accounting and advisory firm specializing in women businesses, owners, and entrepreneurs. After experiencing a lack of resources, difficulty finding connection, and numerous barriers as both a business owner and indirectly through her clients, Nancy launched the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce in January of 2018. She's been working ever since to build a powerful national network and drive the policy changes needed to create a lasting gender and economic equity in Canada. Alongside Nancy, we have our four panelists today. Firstly, Diane Wolfenden, General Partner with Phoenix Fire. Diane is an active angel investor. Since 2009, she's been a charter member of the Golden Triangle Angel Network, or GTAN, and has served on its board twice. In 2016, she received GTAN's David Board's Community Builder Award, Builder of the Year Award. Formerly an investor with RBC Dominion Securities, she also gives back as a community volunteer. She sits on the board of the Stanford Summer Music and chairs the community aid fund for the Kitchener-Conestoga Rotary Club. She is former chair of Equation Angels and the board of governors of the Grand River Hospital Foundation and the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Wow, that's a lot of coffee. Diane received both her MBA and MLS from McGill University. Next, we have Janice Byrne, an associate professor in entrepreneurship at the Ivy School of Business. She's an educator, a researcher, and a scholar activist. Janice has studied gender in entrepreneurship for the last 20 years in a variety of different geographical locations and contexts. Her work has been published in numerous international peer-reviewed journals. Her recent work has focused on gender dynamics in the entrepreneurial finance space, with specific focus on women investors and investor support for women-led firms. Our next two panelists are graduates of CanWCC Split the Script program. Laura Venier, founder of Arch Biotechnologies, holds an honors Bachelor of Health Science and Masters of Biomedical Innovation from McMaster University. Arch Biotechnologies is a medical device startup focused on improving clinical monitoring in acute care. Laura has raised over $250,000 in dilutive investments and won over $100,000 in non-dilutive grants for her company. She is an author on multiple peer-reviewed publications and patents, including multiple filings in which she is a sole inventor. And finally, we have Faith Olawantoba, founder and CEO of candidly, who is a serial entrepreneur and travel industry expert with a global background spanning multiple markets. She's the founder of candidly, an AI-powered platform transforming how organizations plan and coordinate group travel. Built from her experience managing complex group trips globally, candidly replaces the fragmented process of email spreadsheets and manual coordination with a single AI system that brings structure, visibility, and efficiency to every stage of group travel experience. Thank you to our panelists for being here today, and I look forward to today's discussion, and I'm going to pass it over to Nancy.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you to everyone here today for sharing some time with us during this busy Toronto Tech Week. And I think we will just jump right in. So this is a question for all of the panelists. When you think about investment in tech startups today, what's one assumption the ecosystem still gets wrong? Do you want to start, Diane?
I'd love to start. Thank you, Nancy. So I think the one big assumption that the ecosystem still makes, and which is wrong, is that male founders make the best founders. Globally, about 30% of companies are founded by women. Yet in 2025, 84% of all investment in early stage companies globally went to all male teams. Right, it's a huge discrepancy there. Only around 2% went to female-led teams. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yes, I got it. And about 14% went to mixed gender teams. But this, despite the statistics that show that women tend to have better economic results with their companies, have 35%, some studies have shown as high as 35% better results. And we all know that mixed, diverse teams make better decisions. Right? So we're making the wrong assumption about tech companies need to be founded like that.
I think building on that, the biggest assumption, so over the last 2 to 3 years, I've spoken with lots of different angel and VC investors in Canada, but also I've been involved in research in New Zealand and France and the UK. And one thing I hear continuously is I'm gender neutral. I don't care. Or I don't care if they're black, green, or red. These type of kind of comments, basically, I'm just interested in the best, finding the best venture, the best founder. Just no, it's just cannot be the case. And so this basically the assumption of a meritocracy. It's the myth of meritocracy. No, the best founders are being passed over.
So building on what Jenny said, what I have found is, the assumption of what it means to be a best founder. What I've realized is that, investors typically assume that you need to have exited one or two companies and had some experience. You need to have some elite experience, maybe graduated from Ivy League or being part of some very prestigious organizations. You need to come from a certain, part of society to be respected as a founder even before you speak. And those things sometimes create bias and, shape investments, where investments go to.
Those are all really great points. I think for me, one of the things that I've consistently noticed is on team size as well. So I'm a solo founder, and that raised a lot of red flags with investors. And that's something that has continually come up in conversations. And even though you can build a great advisory board and build all of those things, there's still a lot of resistance from, I think, the investment ecosystem towards betting on solo founders, but specifically solo female founders. I think that's a bigger hurdle as well.
Absolutely. Hello? Yes, it is? Okay, fantastic. So I'll go to Janice. So these things are often they're all about data. So you, drawing from your recent research, what do you see as the main factors contributing to women founders in North America receiving less private capital? And are there other countries that seem to get it right where the percentage is higher for female founders?
So I could break it down in terms of what can explain it? Why is this such a low percentage? Why are women getting a lower share? I think 4 main reasons. There's lots of reasons, but 4 main reasons. So the first one, probably familiar to people in the room, the notion of pattern matching. So the idea that we're looking at past successes, and essentially those past successes, prior successes, have been male founders. So we're continuing repeating that pattern, and there could be an unconscious bias there as far as that we're repeating that pattern unknowingly. The second reason, capital control. So who is holding the money? And we do know that there's less women in VC, there's less women angel investors. So that's one, and we know that birds of a feather flock together. So, and homophily. So we do know that people will gravitate naturally towards like-minded or similar to ourselves. So that can kind of explain some of why. This is the reason why we say we've more women investors, and maybe we'll have more women founders who are being funded. Third reason, and it sounds like an old argument, but I think it's still relevant, is the notion of network access. So whether it's our hockey buds or going to the pub and having a beer, these things happen in informal spaces and places, and we shouldn't underestimate the extent to which women can sometimes be excluded from those spaces. And then finally, the last aspect, again, this may be familiar to some people in the room, but just to flag it, is just the notion of scrutiny and risk framing. And so the scrutiny that women founders are subjected to, and we'll get into this probably a bit later, but the way questions are asked, the way we're approached, and that's by both men and women investors. That we know, I just feel that we have to stop like a mediocre male founder is not being evaluated in the same way as an overperforming woman founder. We need to really do something about that. With respect to how we're doing internationally, or who are kind of leaders in this, and I don't even say leaders, but who's doing better. So the Scandinavians, Northern Europeans, I'm Irish, so I'm not as north as they are, but God, they just always seem to do things right. They're like the best person in their class, aren't they? Oh, them Swedes and sit down and so yeah, so the Finnish actually, about 30% of venture capital in Finland goes to women-led firms. So the Finnish are, and in Europe in general, it's at about 12%. Norway and Denmark around 17 or 20%. But yeah, the Finnish are definitely the leaders with respect to the percentage that's of VC that's actually going to women-led firms. And as I said, that's 30%, it's not 50%, right?
Diane. Hot seat. From the investor side, what are the most common unintentional filters applied in early screening?
Yeah, so when we look at, Jen has touched on this, when we look at how male founders are evaluated, or the kinds of questions they receive, they tend to get asked what we call promotional questions. They get asked about growth, they get asked about their vision, they get asked the kinds of questions that are really positive that allow you to be very expensive in your answers. When we look at what the kinds of questions that female founders get, it tends to be more preventive. It's more about risk management and how you're managing the downside. And answers to those kinds of questions tend to be like, they're not as exciting, right? You know, so that tends to give you, so if you answer that question directly, you're not providing the same kind of optimism or visionary answer as the men get. Yeah, that tends to be cool. So one of the things I think that women founders need to do is be very expansive, be able to reframe those questions, be very expansive in terms of looking to the growth strategy, looking to where they want to take their companies.
So where in the funnel is bias most likely to occur?
Okay. So as was referenced by Andrea, I'm an experienced angel investor through Global Thriving Angel Network, which is based in Kitchener, India. So I'm going to talk about what my experience is in Ontario. So it might be slightly different in other parts of the country. But if I think about G10, any founder first has to go through what's called office hours and then pre-selection. So they get asked, there's a very brief meeting. If they're successful in sort of answering the questions in that brief meeting, they get to selection, where again they do a very time limited pitch, and they may get one or two questions around what was in their pitch. The bias tends not to come out in those sessions because you don't have a chance to go much deeper. Where bias, I think, tends to come out is in the actual investment meeting when founder pitches. Then there's way more time for the potential investors to ask questions. And then where it also comes out more deeply is then when you're going into what we call the next stage, which is the deeper dive, the due diligence. And this is after, the investors have seen you, they've put up their hand, they want to learn more about your company, and then you open your deal room to those investors. And so one of the things so a good deal room can really make a big difference. And what I mean by a good deal room is a deal room that is well organized. It's easy to find the information, but has a lot of comprehensive information around the problem that you're solving, right? And you want that problem to be really attractive, big, hairy, easy to understand. And then you want to build your information around how you're going to tackle that problem. And so if you can do that, then you're going to pull people away from focusing so much around risk and risk mitigation and the downside.
Hey, what patterns have you noticed in speaking to investors? What patterns have you noticed in the types of risks that investors tend to focus on?
Yeah. So one of the biggest questions I always get is about, the risk of quickly being absorbed by incumbents. The travel industry has giants. And so most times when I get asked those questions, it's also coming, from a kind of misunderstanding of how the travel industry operates. it's travel, but they are different operators and they're different kinds of business. Now, Van is not the same as Expedia, and the customers that they serve is different. Same with Cotriply, it's very different. Amex business is very different, but most times we don't really understand. The investors don't really understand those, details, and so that comes up in the questions. And so what I try to do is to get ahead of it. So even in pitches, in presentation, I say, I know you're already thinking that, oh, it's such a competitive space, but this is how we're different. Another would be, what she said about the team risk. So right now we're still a very small team. We also have a limited number of advisors, and so I get questions about that. Can you pull it off? So that's also that comes out a lot so far, and I try to also get ahead of it thanks to the Flip the Script program. So I'm better prepared. Another risk would be, like the technology and the operational, technology in particular. Everyone is talking about AI, agentic AI is rolling, but I still also low level of trust in AI platforms. And also because Cotriply is B2B, there's a lot of security questions. So that also comes up, that's also another pattern. And, I also try to understand from the investor perspective, right? It's real money that they are putting in. They want to be sure that it's going to be worth it and another new technology doesn't suddenly, take over. So that, so I factor that in, into the way I respond as well. And then also finally, just, the operational risk, how we're internally structured in terms of operations, the systems and all that. So I would say so far, those are the category of risk that I have encountered a lot while discussing with investors or pitching or applying for grants and all.
How does the lack of access to capital affect your approach to scaling your company?
Come again with the question. How does the lack of access to capital?
Yeah, so your struggle or the constraints on access to capital that you may encounter as a female founder, how do you kind of account for that in your strategic planning around scaling your company?
Yeah, we with no bias to the men, I would say that women are very resourceful when it comes to managing money. So as a female founder, naturally, I am resourceful, and that also shows in how we run the business. And then also, for tech, and also because we are building with AI, we also try to build very agile and lean. Fortunately for us, we got really good advisors from the beginning, even as Contribly was an idea, and we were actually advised to not pursue dilutive capital too early. It's best to build lean, gradually until we get to that point where we do have, really good revenue clients and all. And I would say that, my team and I, like our technical team, we're also very resourceful in using many, available tech resources to, use AI to build and also to train our AI models in doing that. And, so far that has also helped us to manage the lack of access to capital for now. And then another thing that that I've done is early on, I already had a fundraising plan. So even as Cotriply was an idea, I already had a time frame and I started, talking about it early, and, so that's, something I tried to do. So some days, when we look at our runway, you know, sometimes I feel a bit of panic, but I also feel confident, right? Because I'm also, trying to get ahead of it. And I would also say that being a third time founder and a second time tech founder has also really helped me. My first tech startup was a mess. But I learned lessons from there. We ran out of capital and we had to focus a lot on sales, so I learned a lot of lessons from that experience. And so early on with Cotriply, I also try to get the team prepared, so sometimes also I also, try to let the team know how much resources we have and how we need to continue building lean. And again, also being part of ecosystems like this, like the Canadian, Women Chamber of Commerce, that also, there are a lot of sessions that we have on, like building resourcefully, taking advantage of many of the supports, that is available in that, in that system. And that has really helped. But of course, funding remains one of the most important challenges for many businesses. So I'm still pitching, I'm still, having interviews with investors, I'm still applying, for both dilutive and non-dilutive funding. So we still do need capital, but we already have a strategy and we have great advisors that are helping us, get there.
Laura, first of all, I want to congratulate you on the incredible momentum that you're building with is it Arch?
Arch.
Arch Biotechnologies. You've secured non-dilutive funding and pre-seed investments. That's a huge achievement. So based on that experience, can you walk us through some of your recent investor interactions and, just give us a sense of your experiences?
Yeah, so I think for that it's probably helpful to look at my roadmap. We'll say pre a very important conference that I had and then afterwards. So prior to a conference recently, and when I was first starting to raise money, it was very much an uphill battle. I was very lucky that because my company began as a master's project, there's a group called Front Row Ventures that invests in students and student-led companies. So I was able to go to them first, and they were the first check-in that was able to set the terms for the rest of the round, which was a massive help. Having that first check and someone willing to commit money at a specific term, that's really what you need to start getting the momentum going. After that, I really leaned on my network. The people who put in money were people that I had known or people who I had worked with. One of the engineers that I was using as a contractor, he actually ended up liking the business so much that he ended up investing money. So there's something to take away from that, which is you never know who can be an investor, and specifically clients, people you work with, contractors. Odds are if they're in the space and they really like what you're doing, they'll be willing to take a risk on you and to try to support you along the way. Then I would say most recently, I noticed that I was reaching kind of this lull in fundraising where I was able to get this pre-seed round closed. But for medical devices, you need to raise a lot of money, specifically for regulatory approvals. I've never heard of a company that's been able to submit a 510K without at least $5 million in funding. So there's a very high barrier to entry for the medical device spaces. One of the challenges that I found when trying to raise that larger round was no one wanted to take a bet on someone who wasn't a physician and who wasn't a classically trained engineer. I was in that middle ground where I have a background in health sciences, a master's of biomedical innovation. Although I've done all the technical development, on paper, I'm not an engineer, and on paper, I'm not a urologist. So I was at this intersection where I really needed some credibility. For that, I kind of went out of my way to look for what are those catalyzing events that could really lend that air of credibility. So I found the American Urological Society, they had an innovation boot camp, and that led to a showcase that happened in May. So I showed up at the boot camp in September. I learned a lot, and that's probably the most polite way of saying that I was very unprepared for the stakes and the caliber needed to really compete in the US ecosystem. But I showed up to the boot camp, took that as one of the biggest learning experiences, showed up to every single workshop that they had, went above and beyond trying to learn everything I could from everyone I met in that ecosystem. And then coming to the showcase, it happened a couple weeks ago. The reason, so my company ended up winning, but the reason we ended up, but the reason we ended up winning was because of the work that we had put in, consistently showing up, asking questions. Relationships and investors, like those are long-term relationships. Bringing someone into your cap table, that's a marriage. And it's really important to know who you're getting married to. And I cannot stress that enough. Relationships take time to build. And what helped a lot on the fundraising side was now that I have this win from the AUA, there's that lens of credibility that I'm supported by the American Urological Association. So there's just by doing well in their ecosystem and their programming, that credibility is able to transfer onto me, which has made investment conversations now significantly easier. I had people putting in checks and wanting to write checks, reaching out to me first, which never happens if you're a founder. Normally you're begging for a few minutes of someone's time. So I would always encourage anyone to look for those opportunities that can give you credibility. Look for those leapfrog moments. Like, what can you reach for? What seems realistic, and what can you really work towards? Who has credibility in the ecosystem, and do they have a way for you to be supported by them? And that's really what I would try to encourage anyone who's in that fundraising lull.
Amazing. That's awesome. So this is a question for everyone. What is one thing that investors or founders could do that would materially change the fundraising experience? Anyone can start.
was thinking about this one.
Yeah.
So I think the one thing that we absolutely need are more women in venture capital. Janice, you touched on about the number of angel investors, and actually NACO came out with a report last week that said that 40% now of angel investors are women. So we are starting to get much better at the early stage funding, as early stage funders. But when women companies want to raise a Series A, they need to go to VCs. And only 15% of VC partners are women. And stats show that if you don't have a woman in the VC, they're unlikely to support a female founder. All right, so female founders having difficulty getting the big raise. So I think we really need to encourage and push for more women venture capital.
And if I could build on that, policy wise, because it's so important, I think it's a really good point, then. And I think people don't like quotas, people don't like mandates, but they make a big difference. And I feel like when I talk to people, VCs, they don't always know, well, what percentage of our portfolios are women. They don't always know, for a start. Well, that's not bloody on, right? They should have, it should be mandated disclosure. It should be mandated that we evaluate what our processes are. We should know. It should not just be a question of, oh, hang on, let me go and have a look at that, right? No, that's just not on. And I also think that if we want to move the needle even further, there's a lot, for example, in France, that there's for VC firms who want to work on co-investment with with government-led initiatives. Well, then there's a mandate. So if you want to work together with us on this, you have to have at least 30% women founders. And it's when you do those type of things, when you put those mechanisms in place. And I know people don't like quotas, people don't like mandates. But I mean, the proof, if you look at like Norway, like 30, 40 years ago, when they didn't have enough women in politics, they put them in, and then about 10, 15 years later, they got rid of them. Right?
Does it work?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
From a founder perspective, I would say having confidence, as a female founder is very important, because what I have noticed is that, when it comes to women and female, male and female founders, there's kind of a difference. Most males, like, they just ask for what they want. They don't overthink it. They want 500K, they go there and they ask for the maximum. For us women, we tend to rationalize, we don't want to come too strong. We don't want to ask for too much. We want to be seen as humble and, careful. And so I have also learned to beat that, mental block. If the maximum is 50,000 or 500,000, I am asking for everything. If you can't give me everything, then I take a bit. Then also, confidence in terms of who I reach out to. If I feel an organization is a good fit as an investor or a client, I go for them. It doesn't matter how highly placed they are or how really prestigious they are. I'm open to getting no's, and no is not always final. Sometimes it's come back later. So I've also had to work on my confidence, and that has also helped me, also winning pitches, like winning grants, approaching investors with confidence. Even from the moment Coach Ripley was an idea stage where we had nothing, we already won a pitch, so that's very important, especially for, females asking for money and trying to raise and building something innovative. That confidence it's really important. And even as a Black woman as well, because, you know, as a Black person here, there's also a mental block. Like, I want to stick to certain organizations that are like me, and who knows whether they would look at me. So I have also tried to fight that block, right? You know, you know, even though I'm Black, or even though I'm a female, I can still, if I have confidence in what I'm building, if I have I do have confidence in what I'm building, and what's, you know, what I'm scaling, and so I can approach any organization if I'm prepared and I know what they need. And then also with preparation, I don't aim for 100%. Even if I'm 50% or 70%, I still take the chance, because sometimes, you know, some of the wins that I get, I'm not always 100% prepared. And there's something that investor sees, or, you know, the organization sees, that make them willing to take a chance. And I've observed that a lot with clients. So yes, that has worked for me, and that's what I would recommend.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the confidence piece, and because that brought up something that one of my advisors would always say to me, which is, he's a male advisor too. So, and he would always say that men will do half the work, but have double the amount of confidence. And I think I've seen that a lot with female founders. Some of the most confident people I've met have been female founders, but they don't have the street cred, they don't have the confidence that really backs it up. And especially in the life sciences space, academia is very different than business and industry. In academia, there's this defense mindset, where if you present a piece of information, you're defending your methods, you're defending how you present it, and it's very akin to like a thesis presentation. Versus in business, you have to say the statement, you have to say it confidently, and then if you get asked questions, you pull up the information to support it. But there's a different approach of the confidence level expected in industry versus in academia. And then I would say one of the other things that I've noticed, for the risk side and just making the fundraising process easier, confidence. And I've never met a female founder that is incompetent in their area. But there is a lot of work that has to be done to get a startup from where it is, or the initial ideas, all the way through to something that's investment ready. And really, that's just a chunk of work, and everyone just has to, you know, put their heads down and do it. But the reality is, I've seen women founders, female founders do it exceptionally well. And when they create a data room, I've been in data rooms before where you'll look at the materials and you'll say, like, this is great. However, it doesn't say that one key thing. It doesn't have that one overarching statement. It's implied, but you didn't explicitly say that this is the best for this reason. There's a level of confidence that you need to have when just having those big takeaways at the tops of documents too. So you're able to, so someone can read that and get the sense that not only are you very confident in your material, but you're so confident that other people can join you along this journey as well. And there's almost a difference in that level of confidence. It's the difference between being confident in what you know versus being so confident that other people can come and join you. And that's really what I think makes the big difference for female founders when raising funds.
Yeah, absolutely. I've often said that I don't understand the women and confidence disconnect, because all the women I know are super confident, but they don't necessarily express it in the same way that men express confidence. So I think it's not only do you have to be confident, but you have to express it in a way that's recognized by others as confidence, which can be very foreign for women, I think.
I just have to jump in here for a moment, because if I don't, I will just like load your book. It's plus fort que moi. So the idea is, I think that I just have to transmit is, I hear all of this on the confidence thing, but we cannot forget that at the same time there are certain gender norms in society. So that if a woman she can be too confident, just like she can be too authoritarian, just like she can be there's all these things, we can be too aggressive. And then the male founder will not be judged by the same standards. So I just feel like, yes, there is lots of things that we can do, but to work on the women, right? But you know, work on the system, and also for for male investors or for all investors to double check themselves. Yeah, she annoyed me. Why did she annoy you? What was bugging you there? Did she speak a little bit too loudly? Was she a little bit too forceful? Was she a little bit too gung-ho for you? Well, maybe if she was a man, you wouldn't have actually reacted to that in the same way.
And the research that Diane mentioned about the promotional and preventative questions, which is actually the research that underlies the Flip the Script program that both of our founders here today participated in. This is a program that CanWCC has for founders. So that research showed that both men and women VCs showed the same propensity to have that biased question, sort of, I guess, lens and the type of questions that they were asking. So, you know, we all have unconscious bias, and it's not so much from because someone is raised as a man or a woman, but it's the culture, it's the gender norms that we are surrounded with from the moment we're born, I think. Okay, thank you so much. Given the option, I could pontificate on gender norms and the patriarchy all day long, but I'm actually going to turn it over to the audience. We have time to answer some questions. Yes, okay.
Awesome. So here, let me pass this to you.
Thank you guys so much for.
I don't know if it's on.
I'll speak loudly and hopefully nobody will be annoyed by me. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here. I really appreciate it. My question is for Diane, because you spoke a bit about gender bias in kind of the middle of the investment funnel. And I'm curious because Janice mentioned that pattern matching. So are you seeing the same ratio of companies that apply and then the company like gender split and pre-screening gender split? And then also at the other end of the funnel, to Faith's point, are you seeing in the portfolio that female companies are enduring longer and better, or are they getting stuck at kind of that Series A phase?
So I can't really, I don't have the data to answer you.
Sorry to jump on it.
No. So the question was around, people coming in, women founders coming in through the funnel and sort of coming in and getting out here, sort of the same percentages. And I don't know that because I'm not always involved in the early stages and doing that filtering. But in terms of women founders raising enough capital, what we see is, and what the data says, is that women have real difficulty raising as much money as men. The rounds tend to be smaller. And the difficulty with rounds, smaller rounds, is you have to raise more often. And as these two can attest, raising money is really tiring, right? You don't want to raise money unless you have to, because it takes so much energy. What you want to be able to do is raise enough money to give you 18 to 24 months running. Right? So you know how much you're going to spend to get you where you need to be. You want to raise that capital. So consistently, we see women having to sort of ask for less or receive less, and that compromises their growth. Then what we consistently are seeing when they go then for their Series A, they may not even get a Series A. And if they get a Series A, they get a smaller Series A. And so the problem keeps on getting compounded. So that's what we have to fix. And there's a lot of women investors out there doing a lot of heavy lifting, but we don't control enough capital at this point. Right, so we have to open up all the capital that is controlled, get more women into making those decisions, women into VCs, so that women-led companies get the capital they need, the time they need, and get the capital they need to grow. That's that. So I guess the answer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Faiza, and I'm the program officer at an incubator called the Black Founders Network that's made to support Black founders at all stages of their journey. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I was really in awe by all of your insights. I unfortunately missed part of the beginning, part of the panel discussion. But I recently watched another panel discussion that talked about the importance of the right conditions for certain things to thrive. And I'm a big, as much as I'm aligned with the idea of how things should be, there's also the necessity of accepting what things are as is. So as participants in the audience and also as panelists, what are some actionable steps that we can take to kind of shift from that what should be to what is? How can we actually create the right conditions for us to all thrive? And this is directed at everyone.
Well, I have Mike, so why not give you a quick answer first and I'll pass it down. One of the things that, and we've touched on it, that I think all founders need to do, but particularly female founders, is really go out and sell. Sell your big idea, sell the big problem and sell your solution. Right? We tend to be a little more hide our light under the bushel. I hide a light a little bit, but you really need to be confident around selling your big idea. Right. And it goes back to what Laura was saying about self-confidence. You have to have the self-confidence. You have to really know your material. You have to be resilient and you have to be persistent. And those are the things that we look for in all founders, but particularly female founders. And I do think a really strong data room that has the information that investors are looking for give investors a reason to say yes, not a reason to say no. I mean, so that means having the information in there that investors are looking for, know what investors are looking for, make it easy to find that information, make it easy for them to want to say a yes to you.
For fear of stating the obvious, I think that when you're experiencing difficulty and struggle and it is hard and you're in that really hard part that takes a long time, misery loves company. And I do feel that when you've got others, and so I noticed that some women don't like to be members of women-only things, right? Or maybe, or so if you're a Black woman and you don't want to just be in the Black woman thing, or there are some people that will push back on that kind of silo aspect because they think that then to be aligned with that, is there some kind of implications for how you are perceived? Personally, from what I've seen and from research that I've come across, I do actually think that there is so much to be learned and gained for being a part of those networks, not just from a moral support point of view, but also just in terms of information, that I do think those type of networks are useful. And as I said, perhaps that is stating the obvious, but I just wanted to flag that.
For me, I learned a lot. So I'm part of a lot of ecosystems. You know, I learned from the men, I learned from the women, you know, I learned the language, you know, so that has helped me to also make sure that Cotriply is ready when when we're really ready to appeal both to male and female investors. And then as mentioned about the Flip the Script program, towards the end, there were actually actionable items on how we can go out there and raise even in a male dominated investor ecosystem. So just learning, expanding my networks, connecting with everyone, learning the language, trying to also work around the bias around it. Yeah, so that has helped me. And also working with there are certain organizations that their role is to do due diligence on behalf of investors with startups, and they get paid by those investors or the investment organization. So yesterday, I connected with one of such organizations and I'm working with them, and they've really helped a lot of startups secure funding. So that has also helped, that's also helping me as well, understand how to navigate these challenges. And also shout out to the Black Founders Network, which I'm also a part of. And to your point, it's very important to connect with, you know, similar ecosystems, you know, as a Black person, also with the Black Founders Network, because it also, you know, confirms the fact that yes, it's possible when other startups who are owned by Black founders are doing great, and even Black female founders are doing great, and it just confirms that yes, it's actually possible. So yeah, shout out to you, Pfizer.
Thank you. Firstly, that was a great question. I think if everyone waits for the perfect conditions to start, nothing would ever get started. So I think just recognizing that the world will never be perfect, but the only way to get something done is to start. I think that's the kind of the first thing I would say. Another point I would say, and this specifically I've noticed with female founders, is there's almost a lack of comfort talking about money and talking about fundraising, how much capital do you need? And you know, there are all of the words to talk about capital and funds, but very few people that I know can just say money. How much money do you need? How much are you asking for? How much are you looking to raise? And I think that's a big component. Like we have to get very comfortable talking about money and risk because that's what the men do. So we may as well do it too. And then I would say the next part is learning, being in that learning mode. When you're entering this VC world, this investment world, there are norms, there are traditions, and all of them are like industry specific to the area that you're in. So like the life sciences sector is very different than the travel industry, and the words that they use, the terms, like I'm always talking about reimbursement and insurance, which I would imagine doesn't come up too often in investor conversations on your side. So really making sure that you know who you're speaking to and you know what's respected and familiar in the field. The goal is really to understand what they like, understand how to communicate in a way that's familiar. So it's a lot easier for them to do the pattern matching, and hopefully they'll pattern match onto you rather than someone else.
One more question? One more?
One more?
Over here? Your hand.
I'll go last.
Two more questions. Nothing more questions.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Brown, founder of Funding Impact. We are an emerging fund that's focused on supporting women and diverse entrepreneurs across Canada. And so my question today is a two-parted. One part is, I know we're focused on how bias shapes investor decisions. Janice, I'm wondering, is there any ways that we can leverage the foundation of like business school or other institutions to support with some of that fundraising? And then Diane, on the side of, you know, fundraising for an emerging fund that has a focus on women that is not 100% focused on women. Are you seeing that the investors are wanting like those with gender lens to be 100% focused on women? And if they are, you know, what are some of the ways that we can frame this to make sure that they're also seeing the value in a not fully 100% women gender lens? Thank you.
So speaking for myself, not my business school, but is there things that business schools can do for sure? Absolutely. And I think there are efforts being made to do that. Small things like having like, you know, if you're a business school like mine is Ivy, where we use a lot of case studies, having an increased number of women protagonists, so that it becomes normalized, right? I mean, and this is crazy, but when I first started teaching at Ivy in 2019, in the entrepreneurship course, the 10 cases that were on the course that were taught to students, business school students, elite business students who are going out into the world, who could potentially work in VC, be involved in due diligence. They were taking an entrepreneurship class, and 10 of the cases, 9 of them were about men entrepreneurs. That was in 2019, right? Now, spoiler alert, I changed that one. But no, so we can change in terms of visibility, like who's being talked about, and we can also change, you know, like in terms of having classroom conversations and role plays and building awareness among our students, men and women, about ways in which bias can creep in, putting them in situations like real situations with respect to like literally looking at the questions that founders get asked. And getting them to dig into some of that stuff. I've definitely done that in the classroom. So that's, I definitely think, one thing that we can do. And I also just finally think that we we need more Dianes in the world. We need more investors who really care about this, both men and women. And we need to get them in front of our students, because lots of our students in business schools, they might necessarily want to be entrepreneurs, but they do want to go into, say, VC or private equity. And we need to get them speaking to people who want to change things and who are in the industry. And we need to expose them to role models in that regard too.
Thank you, Janice. Yeah, I'm just gonna touch on your first question as well a little bit. So I'm an instructor for the National Angel Capital Organization education program at NACO Academy, which has just got relaunched. And one of the conversations I'm having with them is how do we put gender bias on that in that curriculum. So we're surfacing there with all new investors. We're surfacing in a way that's positive versus negative. As Nancy has said, we all have bias, right? None of us is unbiased. We need tools that help all of us surface those biases. And so that's what I'm talking with NACO about, and see if we can't get that across the Angel network. Like, we're ways away from doing it, but at least we're starting to have the conversations. On your second question, is your reference to your fund investing in men as male founders as well as female founders? Is that an issue? Yeah, I don't see that as an issue. I mean, Phoenix Fire, which is the fund in which I'm a general partner, we invest in female founders, but we define a female founder as a woman on the cap table who has equitable equity. Right. So a lot of the companies that we've invested in, they have male co-founders. You know, they are mixed gender companies. So to me, that is not an issue for you.
All right. Hello, great panel. Thank you so much. I had two questions. One simple one, and I think one to be a little bit more convoluted. But great statistics, by the way, about the women VC. Only 2% of women founders in the US get VC. It's only 2%. But Miss Diane, my elevator partner, the solo entrepreneur getting VC seems to be kind of a flag. And I've heard that many times. No one's answered that question for me. Why is that? And then the two founders on the end, third time founder, first time founder, you hinted at speaking the language. My question to you all is, how important do you think that is to be able to speak the language? And could you share whether or not you spoke the language when you first started?
Okay, so I'll answer the question first about the sole founders. And the reason a sole founder is an issue, and in fact it's an issue for Phoenix Fire, is that if anything happens to that individual, essentially, who's going to carry forward that company, who's going to carry forward that investment? But there is a solution, and in fact, we have just invested in our first company that has a sole female founder. So we invest in also companies with female teams and mixed gender teams with our first sole founder. And what we asked her to do was buy key person insurance. Does everybody know what I mean by key person insurance? Yep. So key person insurance, it's a kind of insurance where you're investing. So it's money pays out if anything happens to that individual. Right. And so we have simply asked her to buy. So her investment round was 1.5 million. And we asked her as a condition of our investment to buy 1.5 million of key person insurance. Right? In that case, if anything happens to her, then the investors get their money back. Not they want anything to happen to her, but that provides a guarantee. So there's a way around being a sole investor, but it's really around risk management, right? What happens to that? What happens to the company if something happens to that? And that's the other way around that is for that individual to build a strong team around her and make sure that she's giving them equity in the company so that they will stay. Over to you.
Okay, so to your question, let me even start with my first startup Group by Hype, which got acquired, last December. When I started it 2 years ago, I had no idea about all this fundraising, like cap table, all that. And because I was really overwhelmed with trying to, build it, selling and, raising that revenue, because that was the only language I understood, like blue collar, like you get clients, you sell, you make money, profits, that's it. So I ran away from all that. And, I kept, selling, and, we had 500K in the first year, 1 million by the second year. And so when it was time to get acquired, it was actually one of our clients, and, that acquired us with the support of a family office. That was when all of this language things started, coming into play. Due diligence that, should take a few months took almost 8 months. And, it was like, go back and bring this, go back and bring this. And luckily I had a co-founder who really understood the process, so we both learned it. And so that got me thinking, like, this is really important to understand early on, because that way I can start preparing, which is helping me with coaching. But yes, I had been in that situation where I had no idea, and it's also affected in terms of, the negotiations, right? It was good, but I didn't really understand a lot of things. And that competence you were talking about is very important, So I was actually, as the founder, I was the backbencher, and my co-founder was more prominent in the discussions. But that was also a learning experience for me. So learning those language is very important. Like yesterday, I was talking with the due diligence organization I was, interacting with, and they told me something that the founder mindset typically is to disrupt things, right? You want to break the rule because that's how to show you're innovative. But investors are the opposite. Yes, they want to invest in disruptive companies, but you still need to follow the rules to make sure that the money is safe. So how do you find a middle ground? That was my question to him. How do I then find a middle ground? And so the goal is eventually I would learn that, over time. So
Those are really great points. And I would say adding to that language piece, like that self-education is really important. I did a master's of biomedical innovation, but academic theory versus being out in the real world is totally different. So one of the things that I did to learn a lot about the ecosystem is, so first with joining groups like this, OBIO is another one, more life sciences specific, the American Urology Association. But then I was actually able to learn a lot just from podcasts, books, YouTube videos. There's a lot of information online, especially if you think about like Y Combinator. Y Combinator is one of those famous accelerators in the US. They have one of the best resource libraries you can ever find. I highly recommend taking a look through. If not, have Claude or ChatGPT summarize the key takeaways for you so it's a lighter read. But really make sure you're using all of the resources you have. Everyone has access to the internet now, or I hope everyone does. And there's just so much available online. And being able to go into a room confidently, being able to understand terms, it makes a big difference for how you feel, the confidence you have, and how you can show up. And the other thing I'll say to that is never feel bad when you're in a room, like pausing and asking for clarification. No one's expected to know everything. And especially in a startup, things are just starting up. You're at the earliest phases of building. So there's an expectation that things will change, things will evolve. It's impossible for everyone to know everything. But what's really important is having a way that you can communicate and you can talk. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in a position where you're in a negotiation and someone's talking about terms. Maybe they're talking about adding an MFN or a ROFR. And before you know it, you can be accepting things that you don't fully know. And that's a dangerous situation to be in. So really make sure that you're taking the time to pause and learn ahead of time as much as possible. But once you're in the room, never feel bad about asking to pause or asking a question to clarify, to understand something a little bit deeper, because that's how you have meaningful conversations and that's how you push a deal over the finish line.
Thank you so much to our panel, and thanks for your candor, your expertise, and sharing. Before we conclude the event, I want to introduce to everyone here CanWCC's Flip the Script program. So we have a short video, it's like 5 minutes. If you'll turn your attention to this.
What makes FTS unique? FTS recognizes and celebrates women entrepreneurs' knowledge, strength, and potential. It acknowledges systemic barriers and provides skills that participants can use to subvert and overcome some of those barriers. It is based on peer-reviewed research and developed by Canadian women who are experts in their fields. All of these factors contribute to making FTS a new, fresh, and industry-leading tool that inspires and engages women business owners.
FTS takes a comprehensive approach to business financing, understanding that successful businesses require both equity and debt financing. The course content explicitly addresses this, and the training software includes simulation scenarios with a bank lender and angel and VC investors. FTS participants learn and practice fielding questions specific to debt versus equity financing. Artificial intelligence is deeply and broadly integrated into the FTS training software. This goes beyond word counts or content summaries. The FTS training software constructs tailored questions based on the user's input and provides rich, specific feedback and coaching based on their answers. Feedback is immediately available so entrepreneurs can continuously practice and iterate. After each simulation session, participants can review data and coaching feedback on their performance. They can also experiment with differently worded pitches and communication styles in a realistic but risk-free environment. Detailed data reports allow users to track progress over time. This is especially useful for individuals who struggle with high levels of anxiety or those for whom English is not their first language. Seeing evidence of their progress with the simulation training software gives them the confidence they need to pitch their business to real lenders and investors.
Let's look deeper at the simulation software and how it uses AI. The AI simulation software has a user-friendly interface, easy navigation, and a suite of tools. It's designed to equip participants to excel with everything from voice analysis to content feedback, from practice sessions to real-time adjustments. At its core, the software deploys a sophisticated framework designed to dissect the anatomy of participants' answers. This framework is not just a set of algorithms, it reflects a user's entrepreneurial spirit, fine-tuned through technology. AI is used to examine a pitch's structure, dissecting it into tangible metrics. It looks at the message's clarity, coherence, and emotional cadence. This comprehensive scan seeks to align the pitch with the unwritten rules of compelling storytelling. The software's AI feedback tool considers content, delivery, engagement quotient, problem solution fit, and more. Within these metrics, the AI further delves into the intricacies of the user's performance. It considers the depth of explanations, strength of arguments, and persuasiveness of the call to action. The simulation software is not just about the what, but also the how. This is where the true power of AI feedback lies. When a user answers the lender and investor questions, the AI doesn't just hear words. It understands context, detects patterns, and gauges sentiment. Here's how the AI constructs its feedback. It begins by dissecting the content of the answers. Are ideas clearly expressed and well articulated? The AI evaluates the clarity and coherence of the message, offering suggestions to amplify the narrative. Then it examines delivery. The AI scrutinizes the pace of speech, the confidence in the user's voice, and the persuasiveness of their delivery. The AI is also emotionally intelligent. It senses the passion behind words and encourages users to channel that energy to connect with their audience on a deeper level. With this three-dimensional feedback, users can fine-tune every aspect of their answers, transforming good into great and great into exceptional.
Finally, Flip the Script works. From July 2024 to March 2025, the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce conducted its FTS pilot program, funded by a grant from the Canadian government's Ministry of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. Close to 300 women business owners completed FTS, and the results were overwhelmingly positive. Results from the 2024 to 2025 FTS pilot demonstrate the following: knowledge of the financing environment, risk capital financing models, and founder competence to determine the right type of financing for their business, increased by an average of 20%. A 10% increase in confidence in pitching to investors was reported.
Flip the Script program is ideal for accelerator programs, investor readiness programs, women's entrepreneurship organizations, programs related to financing that require content developed specifically for women, and individual entrepreneurs who want to learn skills that will help them secure investment for their business. Flip the Script is available in both English and French and is available for purchase starting in March 2025. For more information, please visit fts.canwcc.ca.
Well, so the FGS program, it's available online. It consists of the software as well as an online program that's self-directed. You can learn more about it if you go to fts.canwcc.ca. We have multiple packages available for founders, and if you are an accelerator or an gatekeeper, we're happy to work with you to discuss packages to make it available to your founders. We're just launching it, although we've done multiple pilot programs that have been grant funded. And this is the course that both of these founders have gone through. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending today, spending time with us this morning. Very much appreciate it.